Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Cladd and I am the Acting Director of DEI's Racial and Social Justice Initiative. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our work, and I thought I'd start at the beginning. So back in June, DEI made a commitment of $1 million to become a truly anti-racist organization. We committed to weaving anti-racism into our policies, our programs, our systems, and our culture. This commitment was a direct response to the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and countless other African Americans in the United States. And it was a recognition of the racism that exists in our cultures and in our societies around the world. It was a commitment to addressing this. But we soon recognized very early on that we could not be stewards of anti-racism around the world if we first did not do the hard work at home within our own organization to understand the ways in which our systems and our structures may be driving inequity. We are experts in many things at DEI, but we are not experts in this. And so we partnered with a consulting firm, the McKinsey-Mack Group, to help us understand the difference between performative action and the kind of work that we would need to undertake to drive organizational transformation. Right now, we're working with McKinsey-Mack and their team to design and implement a global baseline assessment, a racial equity audit across our entire organization, within our corporate offices and within our projects around the world, to look at systems and structures, to understand where we need to make improvements. This racial equity audit will be our baseline. It will help us understand where we need to start and help us understand the kinds of solutions that we're going to need to design to really, again, get toward this vision of becoming a truly anti-racist organization. We're working in partnership with our HR teams, in partnership with our affinity groups, and in partnership with the entire organization to really drive this change forward. We've been working on educating ourselves, on learning what it means to be truly anti-racist. Our senior leaders are undergoing coaching right now to understand their roles in driving this organizational transformation. It's a really exciting time at DEI, and it's a long-term, forever commitment. So we're at the start of our journey. It's an incredibly important one, and it's been a real pleasure telling you about it. Thanks so much.
In my Francophone countries where I work, it's really working hand in hand with governments, with USAID and with other partners to improve the infrastructure of health financing and governance in order to improve health outcomes for the populations, and really keeping that laser focus on the people at the end of the day is what makes the work so rewarding and why I'm happy to do it here at App.
I've been with App for, 6+, almost 7 years. And as a young person, I'm still here. That means the company is evolving to continuously meet my need. You know what I mean? So I love that.
We are connected by our values and committed to excellence in everything we do. It's the apt difference.
It is my pleasure to introduce Bobby Jefferson, who will open the centerpiece of this conference, our closing plenary today on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the myth of the urgency of now. It has been my honor to get to know Bobby over the last year, as Bobby serves as a Society of International Development board member. Since he has joined the board, he has been incredibly active as the chair of SID Washington's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Additionally, he is Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at DEI Global Health and on the Racial and Social Justice Initiative Steering Committee within the company. Over to you, Bobby.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. I do appreciate that gracious introduction. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, participants. I know you've had a great day and a productive conversation. Thank you for attending the DEI closing plenary panel. Again, I'm Bobby Jefferson, SID board and direct chief of the technology at DEI Global Hub. You know, from Tulsa, the massacre occurred 100 years ago. So think about the Tulsa massacre 100 years ago, 1921, to Dr. King's landmark speech in 1963, where we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. Those were the words spoken by Dr. Martin Luther King over 58 years ago. And yesterday was the 1 year of George Floyd murder. So here we are today, at this moment, realizing there's a new generation calling on the urgency of now. And each generation before us has made a call to action of change, of betterment, of more inclusive future. The question is, during this time now, what is the window of opportunity? Is it different? Or are we continuing in the arc of history, the footsteps of those who came before us and many of their sacrifices? And is it now, at this time, at this place, with this generation, is this the window for us to make a lasting mark? In international development, we're wrestling with big issues. These issues we are now called to address, from decolonizing aid to the lack of the representation of leadership and development, the use of data to measure and mark progress, accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable to the progress? We're going to have a conversation about diversity, equity, equality, and inclusiveness. So I invite you to join the distinguished panel to engage in this conversation, to explore these issues and others. This panel is moderated by Raj Kumar, founder, president of Devex, and we have the fantastic distinguished speakers. Ambassador Gina Abercombie-Winstanley, Chief Diversity Officer for the U.S. State Department. She will be calling in. Rosalind Brack, Chief Equity Officer, Abt Associates, newly minted. And Ambassador Harry Thomas, Senior Fellow and Yale University's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs. We look forward to having a dynamic, thought-provoking conversation. I turn the session over to you, Raj, and our distinguished speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Fantastic to hear your voice, to be with you, at least virtually. I can't count how many SID Washington conferences I have been to over the years. I'm a proud former member of the board there. And it's just so wonderful to be with you, Bobby, Ann, and everyone else. Even though it's virtual, I would love to see you all in person, but it's great to be here, and great to especially drill down on such a critical topic. And with this all-star panel that SID has put together today, such an honor to be with all of you. And maybe we can just dive into this discussion using the question that Bobby, I think, so eloquently phrased for us right at the start. Is this the window, right? What moment are we in? We have, Harry, you've been an ambassador in 3 countries, in the Philippines, in Bangladesh and Zimbabwe. You've had a distinguished career in the Foreign Service. You've seen this issue over many, many years evolve. Rosalind, you've done so many things in your career before coming to APT, including being the youngest ever chairwoman of the NAACP. You've seen this issue over many, many years. This is not a new issue, but there is something about the moment that we're in. And there is something about this pandemic, about the murder of George Floyd, the civil rights movements that took hold in the US a year ago and have really gone all over the world, that's forcing all of us to ask much deeper, tougher questions about what we're doing. So I guess maybe we just open with Bobby's question here. Is this the window? Rosalind, can I go to you? What is your reaction to that call out from Bobby?
Well, thanks, Raj. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. This is my first SID conference, and I'm just thrilled to represent APT here. You've raised a very important question about whether or not this is the window of opportunity. I've worked in the justice movement for over 35 years, and I would have to say, yes, this is the time. Yes, this is the moment, and it is our moment. The work APT has done since its founding more than 50 years ago has contributed to this transformative arc. And it's brought my organization to this point where we are now able, willing, and excited about seizing the moment to push true change forward. We've answered the call, not just with words. It's not just a political thing for us to do, but with true deeds, as we think about how do we meet the needs of the communities we serve. And so the window of opportunity and change is upon us, but we are not going to be lulled to sleep, as others may, who this co-gratulation, thinking about how we move forward with all deliberate speed. Remember those terms from the civil rights movement, with all deliberate speed, which means you take as long as you want to historically. Now is not the time for us to do that. We are poised, we are ready, and we're moving forward to meet the moment.
And I think this moment is different if you work in international development, as the people following along here do. It's different because the work we do is different. The countries we work in have their own challenges, and we're here trying to address inequities that exist within societies and globally. So there's something unique about this. I want to get into that in a minute, but maybe just, again, continuing with you, Harry, given your long career in the Foreign Service, your distinguished career, what do you think about this moment we're in now? Is it different? Is there a window now we need to address?
Well, thank you so much, Raj, for that question. And pleasure to meet you, Rosalind. Yes and no. Secretary of State Blinken has made unprecedented number of women and minority leadership positions in the assistant secretaries and undersecretaries. It's fantastic. But we don't see that at state and local level. We don't see that in the private sector, and especially the international development sector. A lot of the companies that have contracts via USAID are the least diverse at the top. So it's going to take leadership by them and also pressure, because not everybody's going to be Secretary Blinken. And we have to remember that 2 years from now, we face an election, and the people that support Trump and Marjorie Greene Taylor are, they're not far from power.
It's a fair point. As President Barack Obama used to say, we are trying to become a more perfect union. We are not there yet, right? And there are people who have different views on this very issue, who have been in power until recently, who have very different views on this very issue. You're reminding me, Harry, of when we started Devex. I was a graduate student, and I wanted to get into international development. And I asked around, how do I actually get a job at a place like USAID or at the many agencies, NGOs, contractors represented here at SID? And I was told, you got to go down to Washington, D.C. and you got to network, go to cocktail parties, right? And I got this impression that although we were an industry set up to do good things in the world and to address inequities ourselves, there was something of a club here, and you had to find a way to break into that club. And of course, anytime you have a dynamic like that, it can go against the very ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're here to talk about. And I do want to mention, for all following along, we're going to have Gina get into this conversation at some point. The ambassador is going to join us soon, we're told, but we're hoping she'll be able to dial in. Until then,
I'm in.
Oh, you're in. Okay, that's fantastic. So let me put this to you then, Gina, while we have you here. I know we may not have too many minutes with you, so we want to take this opportunity. You're leading the effort to bring diversity and equity and inclusion at the State Department. Maybe you can just share your views about this moment, this window that we're in today.
It is one of great hope and will be brought to fruition with great determination. I think those are the two things that are in my head: hope and determination. I'm sure that Ambassador Thomas, Harry, and our other speakers have already mentioned, this this gathering of minds and focus from the Hill, from the American people, from people in government. And you are so right, Raj, about the club. Certainly in foreign policy and foreign affairs, one of the challenges is indeed the most important one is breaking through that club. And we do have leadership in the State Department to help put in place changes that will truly level the playing field. And that is giving greater access and knowledge about what is going on. So I think that's great. And I'm going to log off. The doctor's just walked in.
Hey, we are so lucky to have had even a few minutes with you, Gina. If you get back to us, that would be great. But we appreciate that and all the good work you're doing at the State Department. I guess for you, Rosalind, there's this issue, you know it well at APT. The work we're doing, it's different, right? DEI is an issue for every organization in this country, but it's different when your job is to address inequities all over the world. And maybe in some ways, the calls to action have felt very personal to people in this field because they might have said, well, I'm here to do good. How can you shine the light on me? We're here trying to do the right things in the world. But maybe you can talk through where you see the trends around decolonizing development, the calls to action as it pertains to the program countries where agencies like yours work, and this issue of DEI in headquarters or in our corporate culture and our organizational culture. How do you see those things connecting, Rosalind?
I'm again, as I stated with you earlier, I'm thrilled to be at APT, particularly because under the leadership of our CEO, equity is going to be the cornerstone of our long-term strategic plan. It's going to be embedded within the very fabric of our workplace lives. And so as we integrate equity internally and in our project work, both domestic and internationally, we want to emphasize the importance of three things. First, we want to seek to understand how systemic and historic systems, policies, and practices affect the challenges that we seek to address. Second, we want to utilize integrated and multi-sectorial approaches to problem solving that generate resilience, dynamic, and sustainable solutions. And third, we want to focus on evidence-based approaches using data that's measurable and has social impact. But data and approaches and removing barriers that lift up the people we serve and the communities we serve. And so that means both externally and internally building not pipeline, but shorelines that allows those in our local communities to have leadership and be intricately involved in delivering the programs, the solutions in their own communities. You talked about decolonization of aid. We're having that robust conversation within APT, courageous conversations, not only internally, but with our clients and with other industry leaders. To have the self-reflection that's necessary when we think about how do we empower people at the local level for self-determination as they move forward. And so for us at APT, our equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies is demanding that we jump the curve and we think outside the box and we remove folks' cheese, as we remove and break down silos and other inherent barriers that prevent them from moving forward. We want to get rid of the white male Yale phenomenon that has been predominant in the international global sector and really extend an opportunity for those in leadership to look like the communities that they serve.
Yeah, and I guess the issue there, Rosalind, is how important is that, right? And I think we all know it and share it, but it's worth drilling down a little bit further about why it matters. Harry, you served as ambassador in 3 countries, all of which are former colonies, low-income countries, low to middle-income countries now. And I guess I wonder how you see this dynamic playing out, right? Rosalind referred to it in her third point that at APT, they're trying to get more decision-making, technical agency into the hands of people who actually live in these communities. So instead of a plane load of Americans or Europeans coming in and kind of providing advice, it's actually about a sustainable approach to building those capacities locally. How do you see that issue in the countries where you've worked? And how do you see that connecting to this broader conversation we're all having today?
Well, thank you for that, Ron. Yeah, you have to demonstrate leadership first in the embassy or USAID. by hiring people maybe from different religions, different castes, minorities, because all of these countries have minorities. That's why the George Floyd tragedy reflected so well in other countries. So even when I was a mid-level officer in India, I hired the first woman to work in the political section. Some of the men were horrified, but you have to do those things and demonstrate that. Similarly, with the agencies, our implementing partners, they can't all be from one sector, one region. In the Philippines, the biggest challenge was they'd all gone to 2 or 3 schools. And very much, many, I know, Raj, you're familiar with the Philippines. They were from the north or the middle of the country. So how do you change that? So it's an ongoing struggle. And believe me, in some of these countries, it's very difficult to get the local aid staff to agree that someone who's talented but not part of their club should be a participant and respected.
Well, Raj, I want to add that our Apt Australia group is working on the intersection of DEI and decolonization. They've developed a reconciliation action plan that actually outlines how our group works with Indigenous organizations and international development. It really is a recognition and a self-examination that we don't have all the answers. And we really need to go to people in community to have them work out the solutions to complex problems that they're experiencing. And so many of my colleagues are at the SID conference. And so I hope through our networking sessions that we'll have an opportunity to engage with them. And my colleague, Abby Donner, is actually having a roundtable discussion on tomorrow afternoon around decolonization of aid as it relates to gender, equity, and social inclusion that I hope many of our participants at SID will engage in so that they can really hear how APT is serious about this issue and how we're working with intentionality to address these issues of power dynamics, localization, and true racial equity, not only at home, but abroad as well.
Yeah, Rosalind, you used the word earlier, history. And that's not always the word that gets thrown around at a conference like this. There's always a focus on innovation, technology, on the future, right? But the history is so important.
It's critically important.
We got to understand, why are countries in the situation that they're in? Why are people poor? It's usually not just a question of not having resources. It's about being connected to some injustice. And there's some history behind that. And if you don't understand it and you go and you try to solve that problem as an outsider, we all know the many examples where that has failed. And I think, Harry, your examples of the complexity here, understanding the societies where you're working and thinking about diversity and equity and inclusion based on what those local realities are, it makes this a much more challenging body of work for organizations that are truly international, right, to take on. I wonder how all of you react to that. How do you see DEI as different maybe in our space than in others?
Well, Raj, here's, for example, we're about to come up on Pride Month, which we celebrate. And most American corporations celebrate it now. But let's not kid ourselves. You go to Africa, that's not going to be celebrated.
Right.
There's not going to be a Pride March in Zimbabwe. South Africa, yes, but other places not. So how do you employ the LGBTQIA community? How do you support them in a way that doesn't put them at risk? All of these are the challenges that we must face. And it's never easy. So when we can't get on our high horse. Easy to march in London, but not in Harare. Also, the other thing that affects people is weak governance and corruption. So even if you have a good small agency, they have to be very cognizant of the local leader. In the Philippines, the barangay leader or the city council person in Harare, that they don't run afoul of this person because they could lose their life or lose funding. So it is extremely complex, but this is where the United States must continue to be the model, the role model, and live up to our words as we try to be a more perfect union. And I think this administration has made a tremendous start. Let me not let me not say it has not. I'm very commendable. But there are many people in our country who disagree with this.
Well, Ambassador, you've said it so apt, so correct in this regard, that we have an administration now who believes that we are stronger when we work together, embracing our full diversity within our nation. But let's not fool ourselves that what happens here domestically does not always play the same way on the international stage. And so it is not a single bullet or one strategy that can address all of our problems and just overlay them on an international stage. We really, when we're talking about these issues, we have to, particularly those who sat in historic places of power and privilege, we've got to come to these conversations with humility with the sector and have a genuine willingness to talk about power shifting and about how do we move ourselves really out of a job. And are we really prepared to do that? That is the question, to have those courageous conversations about how do we put ourselves out of work, and do we really want to do that? And how committed are we to do this work?
Yeah, there's some dynamics there, Rosalind, that are uncomfortable, right, for people to talk about. And are we really trying to drive ourselves to the point where we're actually out of work? Or maybe it's not that these organizations are out of work, but that the people who have traditionally been in this space aren't there. You know, what's the career trajectory for someone who might have in the past become a technical advisor and flown all over the world, when now we're trying to get more of those jobs to be located in the global South and to be run by people from those communities? That's a real tension.
But there's great honor in being mentors. And I think as we think about this work, the sages of the world who's traditionally been in global development have an important role to play in mentorship and providing expanded opportunities for those who are coming from community level. Because traditionally people who have felt disinherited in this space now feel empowered in the global development space to move forward, to take on new assignments, and to really challenge the status quo. Now, the question remains about how are those who have traditionally sat in power going to respond to that? We have to, again, have courageous conversations, understand that it is about power shifting, it's about sharing of resources, and it's also about making room for others and listening with intentionality about how we can move forward and address issues in a different way, with a different lens that allows all of us to get to a desired end.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, many of you may have seen the New York Times editorial that was called something like, "Is the foreign aid having a Black Lives Matter moment?" And in there, they talked about some of the work we're doing with the Hilton Foundation that we at Devex are doing, covering this issue. And really, they question, is it really the moment? You know, are we in it? Because it does require exactly what you're talking about, Rosalind, some real, it's not just the words, it's not just the narrative shift, which is important, but it's also actually shifting power. And that's not an easy thing to see happen and see play out. And it's going to be disruptive to many people who are part of this space, who are here attending this conference, who want to be allies with it, who want to make it go forward, but it is disruptive to their business models, their way of working. And it's important that we call that out, as you have. Listen, we're about the half-hour mark, and I do want to make sure we get plenty of time for people who have questions, who are following along, to add their voices to this discussion. So if you do have questions or comments or thoughts, I understand there's a place you can add them into the chat, and they're going to get shown to me as well. So I'll try to integrate them into our conversation here. Harry, maybe you want to pick up from where Rosalind left off?
Yeah, I think she made an excellent point about mentoring. It is extremely important to have formal mentoring where you can have metrics, whether it's on the international, national, or local level. So I commend her and her company for doing that. But she also made another excellent point, that people are supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion until it involves their job or a friend's job. Much of the development community is Very much of a club. As you said, Raj, how do you get into that club? A lot of kids graduating from HBCUs or historically Hispanic universities don't have the funds or the wherewithal or even the knowledge to come to a cocktail party in DC or know how to network. So I think that's going to be an even more challenging stature. Look, my father used to always say, liberals just hang you by a lower branch. And I haven't seen that change much.
Yeah, it's an important point. In fact, I was talking with Ambassador Gina Abercombie-Winstanley before this session, and we were talking about how the State Department has made all these efforts to try to increase the pipeline of students coming in through, universities that focus on foreign policy or foreign affairs to prepare for a career at the Foreign Service. And I said, well, how early, do we need to start? And she said, oh, we got to start basically at birth, right? And the reason kind of gets to your point, Harry, which is when you think of where are some of the advantages for breaking into that club, it could be that you took an unpaid internship in college because you could afford to take that unpaid internship. And, our industry, our community for many, many years, because we're a field filled with nonprofits, cash-strapped organizations, said, hey, we've got to, watch our money, husband our money. Of course, we're going to have unpaid internships, but the inequity that creates can be dramatic. It can last decades, right? Or you look at someone like myself. As a kid, I had family in India. I got to travel, and so often we're looking at resumes of young people and saying, hey, what kind of international experience do you have if you want to break into this field? So, are we putting up these barriers that actually exacerbate the inequalities that we are saying we want to unpack and get rid of?
Well, Raj, I would offer that we would change our language, throw away the pipes and the pipelines and add shorelines. Pipelines are very narrow. When one or two get through, is that really enough to really embrace the full diversity of our global village? We need to have a shoreline that allows many, many more folks to come and walk along the trajectory to get to a path to a desired end. Let's think about changing our language as we change the lens that we look at how we solve our problems and how we developed and really mentor folks for not only recruitment, that's important, but it's about retention as well. We want them to survive in this work called global development, but not only survive, we want them to thrive and flourish, to be their best selves when they are working in this space. And I said something about working yourself out of a job. Clearly, I want to continue to work and be a change agent within my organization. And APT is an industry leader here. We're intentional and very thoughtful about the work. Bold leaders, bold thinkers, and innovators and researchers. And when we do that, there's always an opportunity to do more, to think higher, broader, and deeper. And so there will be work in this area. The Bible says that the poor and those who are vulnerable will always be among us. And so we'll always have challenges and opportunities to impact the lives of those we serve so that we can, make sure that people have an opportunity to seek their destinies.
I love that. I love this idea of shorelines, Rosalind. It's an important, language is important. The way we talk about these issues matter. And I think it's a great way to think about this as an opportunity and as something we need to do at scale, right? Not just having this idea of a pipeline where maybe that just one or two, as you say, gets through. I love that contribution. We're starting to get questions coming in. Maybe just before I turn to those, Harry, did you have anything you wanted to follow up on what Rosalind said, or shall I start throwing in some questions here?
No, she was great. Please continue.
Okay, well, we had a question that came in asking, for donors and implementers who are ready to share power, the example Rosalind gave her own organization, APT, what would a true commitment to equity mean? What does it look like? How do you think about this? Harry, do you want to pick up on that question?
Yes, a true commitment to equity would be that we start to look for smaller organizations to fund, maybe bridge funding. They need a lot of help because they do not have the capacity, and we be patient with them as they grow. We tend to focus on larger implementing partners. They get comfortable. Some of them get lazy. They reflect the traits of either the ruling party or the ruling elite, and they have no more relation to the person in the field than we do. So that to me would be equity. But it's going to take a long time, because even in the Philippines, when we were trying to hire some people and provide internships, we couldn't find people in certain parts of the country who really even spoke Tagalog, forget about English. So you have to double down on your commitment and understand that it's going to have to begin a lot younger than we think if you're going to make change in opportunities, attitudes, and behavior.
I agree with what the ambassador has said, that we at APT understand that this whole phenomenon that is called equity, diversity, and inclusion is not a one-off. It's not a journey that's going to be completed in one business cycle or in quarters. We've got to be committed to the long-term journey. But it starts today. It starts with an opportunity and with intentionality to say that we want to do this. It begins with mentoring. And if we can't find individuals in this space that we're looking for, why don't we encourage through our recruitment efforts, going out and talking to different groups, challenge ourselves to think outside of our traditional norms about bringing others in, because people can't be what they can't see. And so in some of these communities that we serve, if we're able to identify one or two people who have even just a mustard seed of talent and experience, and develop that, nurture that, so that communities around them can see that there is a vision possible, then we can draw others to this space that they would want to work with us in global development. And those rising tides will lift all boats.
And donors, obviously, Rosalind and Harry, they have so much power in this. Harry, you were talking about finding these bridging opportunities and helping build up local institutions. Mm-hmm. Donors have huge power. If they incent organizations, they're implementing partners to do that, those implementing partners, they'll do it. They'll do it with excellence, right? If they incent them in the right ways. And historically, donors like USAID have been so focused on risk aversion, making sure every dollar, every American taxpayer dollar can be counted, and that we make sure none of it was wasted. Understandably, there's good political reasons behind that orientation. But I think part of this question around equity is, how much of a priority is it? Are we willing to go out there and push? Are we willing to do what it takes to achieve it? We've got another question that came in that might be interesting. Maybe, Harry, you can pick this up, about the role of academic programs, right? And this person is saying, so many of the people who are in our field, probably in this conference right now, attended a US university or some university in the West, studying international development. And the person's wondering, are those universities getting up to speed with this language around locally led development? Or are they maybe kind of moving in the opposite direction, still training people for sort of the old world that we're all talking about getting past?
Well, I can say with pride at Yale, I believe that we are doing that. We have a small school at Jackson. We have a lot of international students, particularly from Asia and Africa. And they're demanding this. That's one of the reasons. And they work on practices with some of the professors in places from Lebanon to Afghanistan, Iraq, Rwanda, Kenya, to implement programs. So I think it's going to change, but we have to make sure that these wonderful young people don't become elitists themselves. And you see that often. But I think we're doing that at Yale, and I don't think it's particular to Yale. I would like to see, what I really would like to see, my dream would be to see some of the HBCUs and majority Hispanic universities to develop schools of international relations. the way Tuskegee had years ago, where they sent
Right.
people to South Asia, East Asian extension programs. And those people ended up going to USAID. I know it's an expensive thing, but that would be my dream if I were king.
You know, if
I
I can,
like that
if I can
dream.
share my own story, Raj. I began my career right out of college. I attended an HBCU, Virginia Union University, in business administration. My first job out of college was with the USAID, with the Office under the State Department of Reimbursable Training Programs, working with the governments of Nigeria, Bahrain, and Guatemala, doing a technical teacher training program. I knew nothing about foreign service or global development, but an alum from my university headed that program, and I was able to get my first opportunity to work there. But at no time did anyone encourage me that there was a career opportunity in this space. But lo and behold, many, many years later, I've had the opportunity now, 3 weeks at App, to come back full circle, to be here, to be in this space. And I'm honored to do that, and honored to be able to engage with App as we're reaching out to HBCUs to make these types of connections so that we can show the vision possible with researchers and social scientists and policy decision makers from a full gamut of our market capability areas, to talk about there are opportunities here. And we're looking at standing up an equity center where we'll have diverse individuals from HBCUs and subject matter experts who are engaged with us to provide an equity lens for the work that we're doing. As I shared, we're very serious about this work as we seed it forward for generations yet unborn. But it takes a courageous leader like we have, who's working with the CEO Action Group with industry leaders who are moving this conversation forward. And I think that those of us who are working in global development and who have come from outside of global development have some experiences to share, some authentic lived experiences. I shared with my team that I've got street credibility in this area on equity as we are moving the needle forward. And so if we are able to marry the experts, we've got an internal global equity team with subject matter experts who are embedded throughout our organization. With that kind of firepower and working with others in the industry, we can make the true change that we talked about, Raj. We can meet the moment, seize the opportunity, and walk through these doors of opportunities that the Biden administration has provided for us. APT is ready, we're poised, and we're moving forward.
I love that optimism. I really do. And I agree. There's really no excuse at this point. We can do this. Listen, we've got a bunch of other questions that have come in. I know Bobby Jefferson is still on the line with us, and I thought maybe we could ask him to unmute and jump in, because we had a question, Bobby, about flexible schedules and work from home, and whether those may be helpful as organizations try to think about recruiting a more diverse staff. Can they kind of lean into these trends around remote working? Bobby, maybe you have a thought about that as an executive at DAI.
Thank you, Raj, and I do appreciate the comments both by Ambassador Harry Thomas and by Rosalind. So the pandemic has provided this unique opportunity where, like this conference, we're virtual. And so we have the opportunity. I sit on the Racial and Social Justice Committee within DAI. And one of the aspects of that allows us to recruit, hire, retain people who are not sitting in the US, who are in the Global South, and they are part of the leadership team. So what the pandemic, one of the aspects of the pandemic is there's no longer that excuse that you have to bring someone, into your corporate office in order to interview them or have them even part of your executive or senior leadership team. So, within our company, we have people within the senior leadership team that are not just in the U.S. As well. So I would urge, our participants and others to think more broadly and have access to others for that empowerment. oftentimes we think about the HBCUs for recruitment, but what I'm trying to do is think about them not just for recruitment, but really for when we're doing our international development work, when we need access to individuals who don't look like us and they have these barriers, that they want to do internships and they want to be involved. We now have the opportunity at this moment, at this time, to make a difference. And so, yes, the pandemic has offered that. And as people transition to hybrid models, so I think many corporates in the US are transitioning to the hybrid office model. The part that can be the staying power to show that we've changed is the ability to retain people in the global South, in Africa, in minority serving institutions as part of the senior leadership team, where they don't have to be sitting around the table and going off to the coffee breaks. And as you're saying, Raj, those drink type meetings that are always difficult and hard to get into. We have an opportunity to encourage a new culture based on the virtual pandemic.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a culture, Bobby, that's kind of based on results, right? Like, what can you get done, especially what can you get done for people in need? What can you get done against the SDGs? And if we can have this culture of results, what some people refer to as a results revolution, it becomes a lot less important, where you went to school or what kind of connections you had to get into an organization. And as you say, this is a moment of both the civil rights movement, the awakening that happened due to the murder of George Floyd and many others, this moment of realization so many people are having, and the pandemic at the same time, this push to living virtually, working virtually. It's a tragic moment in so many ways, but there are opportunities that come out of it. Listen, we're getting near the end of our time here. I'm hoping you can all hear me as I see the screen freezing up a little bit on me, but I might just go back to you, Rosalind, and see if you're there and have some closing thoughts.
Well, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. I think in this special moment that we have, we've had this pregnant pause because of this threefold pandemic: health, economic. We need to really think about, are we committed to be active participants and not passive spectators when this conversation of equity, diversity, and inclusion is happening at the water coolers or in our strategy sessions and with our corporate boards, and our organizational boards of directors. We need to meet the moment and really be thoughtful and intentional about moving and empowering others in this space. And I just truly believe that we have to be optimistic and be willing to change our behaviors, but I'm confident that courage will not skip this generation.
I love that, Rosalind. And I think you're right. The provocative title of this session was the myth of the fierce urgency of now, right? Are we just taking this moment and saying it's really important to us, but papering over it, not really doing what needs to be done? I understand we've got Gina, Ambassador Abercrombie-Winstanley, back with us. Maybe she can help us close out with some final thoughts. I don't know if she's been able to listen in at all, but Gina, if you're there, we'd love to hear from you.
I am here. It has been a really great discussion, and I hope and believe that everybody should be walking away from this feeling empowered to be pushing this forward. That's really what it's going to take. It is one of these wonderful things right now that people are speaking up, identifying problems so that we can all be part of the solution. So keep speaking and be empowered. That's it.
I love that message. I want to thank you so much, Ambassador, for being here, for the work you're doing at the State Department addressing these issues. Rosalind, you would never know you've only been at APT for 3 weeks. They're very lucky to have you, and we're lucky to get this chance to be with you in this panel. I understand Ambassador Harry Thomas had to drop off for another session, but it's just so wonderful to be with all of you and to be part of the SID Washington conference once again this year on an issue that's really important in our sector. It's pretty fundamental to what all of us do as individuals, as organizations, and whether or not we actually achieve these sustainable development goals that we're all committed to. This is not a sideshow, right? This is core to our ability to get there. It's a subject and a theme we're covering a lot at Devex. We want to hear from you if you have ideas and thoughts and questions. And I turn the floor back over to Ann Simmons-Benton, and with my thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your inspiring thoughts on how we can move forward on this important issue, understanding the history and how to move thoughtfully ahead on the complex issue of DEI, listening with intentionality, then shift power, empower others. The journey starts today. It has been an amazing day. For our participants around the world, thank you all for your engagement today too. You have asked powerful questions. I would ask you to ponder what you have heard today and come back prepared to be engaged and active tomorrow. We have more in store for you tomorrow. A plenary on climate change, a plenary on the pandemic, more breakouts and learning labs. And we also have more networking starting in a few minutes. So I urge you to challenge each other, share your thoughts, and think about how we can move to action. We also have a networking session at 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow before the start of the conference. And that is hopefully to engage some of our partners around the world. So let's all try and be there. This platform will remain open, and you can go to the discussion boards, the innovation showcase, and see lightning talks that you may have missed. And on that note, I am very pleased to show you now another of our lightning talk contest winners, Gunjan Veda from the Hunger Project. And that particular lightning talk is on Shift the Power Starts Within Each of Us, very apropos to this topic. And I will see you at the networking session immediately after the lightning talk. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Gunjan Veda from the Hunger Project, and today I would like to tell you a little story about this glass of water and how it changed my life, how it has the potential to change each of our lives and the world that we live in. I come from India, and as some of you may know, India has an insidious caste system. It is a division of society based on occupation. Only this division is hereditary. So vast segments of the population are subjected to cycles of discrimination, marginalization, humiliation, and violence, physical, sexual, emotional, mental, just because they're born into particular households. But all of this is a thing of the past, right? I grew up reading about Article 17 of our Constitution and the various legislative measures that had been put in place to fight caste-based discrimination. And yet, having worked in the human rights and the women's movement in India for over 15 years, I knew that caste-based discrimination existed, but I didn't realize how ubiquitous it was and how it had pervaded each and every aspect of our lives. Till 6 years ago, when I set out collecting stories of the contributions of these marginalized groups for my book, The Museum of Broken Teacups. If you go to most middle-class households in India, be they in the cities and the towns and the villages, you'll see a separate set of utensils for the domestic help and others who help us around the house with domestic chores. The ostensible reason is hygiene. Because people from impoverished sections of society do not have access to running water, their oral and personal hygiene is suspect. But the real genesis of this lies in the caste system, where certain groups of people are regarded to be so impure that their very touch could pollute. And so sharing utensils is an absolute no-no. This separate glass of water, or a separate teacup, is the ubiquitous symbol of caste-based discrimination in India. And the day I realized the real story behind that separate glass of water that sat in my household, I was shattered. Every belief I held about myself was broken. I had not lived up to my principles and values. And yet I also realized how is it that caste-based discrimination, and indeed all forms of power differentials, continue to exist. It is because of this glass of water sitting silently in our homes. And this is true not just of India, but across the globe. I work with the Hunger Project, an organization that believes in the dignity, agency, and voice of every human being. It is the Global Secretariat for the Movement for Community-Led Development, a consortium of over 1,500 local civil society organizations and NGOs who believe that every human being has a right to voice in decisions that affect their lives. In the last couple of years, we've seen terms like localization, locally led development permeate the development discourse. They're there in every conference and meeting, and yet development continues to be top down. Why? I believe it is because change cannot happen with institutions alone. It has to start with individuals. Till every person working in these organizations believes in the capacities of their fellow human beings, till they believe that people are not beneficiaries but agents of change. We cannot shift the power in international development, how much soever we talk about it. And it's not easy. It means sharing space. It means giving up power. And most importantly, it means trusting that somebody who does not have the same educational qualifications, the same language skills, the vast overseas experience that we do, still knows better about what their communities and their countries need. It means having an honest appraisal of our strengths and roles and forging an equal partnership. And it's not easy. But at the Hunger Project, we know that mindset transformation makes the impossible possible. We've seen it happen in over 14,000 rural communities across the globe. The pandemic has shown us that communities are the first responders in any crisis. And if we truly want to attain the Sustainable Development Goals, then community-led development is the only way to go. And if we truly want community-led development to happen, then the change has to begin with you and me. And it's possible. We've seen in the last year how champions of community-led development have changed not just programs, but massive organizations through their relentless advocacy. If you believe in the dignity of every human being and would like to elevate their voices, you believe in community-led development. And if enough of us believe in community-led development, if enough of us are willing to shatter that separate glass of water that sits in our households, then we can shift the power in international development and move to a world that is more sustainable and empowering. Let's do this.